At midnight, the door slammed open with a deafening bang. Tiana stumbled backward, her 3 newborn babies clutched tightly in her arms, shivering against the bitter cold. The icy wind cut through the thin blankets, chilling their tiny bodies. Her heart raced, but not with fear. She had learned to survive fear long ago. Her husband Jamal stood behind her, frozen and silent, eyes downcast, unable to meet her gaze. Behind him, his mother's face twisted with satisfaction, cold and cruel. His sister sneered, laughing softly but sharply, relishing the scene before them. "She's nothing but trouble," his mother hissed. "3 babies? Too heavy a burden," his sister added, her voice dripping with mockery. Jamal's silence spoke volumes. He had been trained to obey, to bend, to let his family dictate every action. Tonight, he was powerless. Tiana's mind raced. She had just given birth, her body still sore and tender, stitched and weak, and yet she did not cry. Her baby's soft cries filled the room, tugging at her heart with every breath. She moved carefully, each step measured, balancing herself against the cold and the overwhelming weight of 3 tiny lives. Her lips trembled, not from fear, but from rage and pain. The betrayal cut deeper than the icy wind. She had given her love, her trust, her life, and they had thrown her out into the cold. The street was empty, silent except for the wind whistling past the buildings and the soft whimpers of her babies. She pressed them close, rocking them gently, murmuring words of comfort she barely felt herself. "It's okay. Mama's here." Her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed openly. She had to stay strong. Each step was painful. Her legs ached, and her body protested, but she ignored it. She couldn't let them see weakness. They had underestimated her. They had assumed her silence was submission. But silence could be more powerful than screams. Her mind went back over the past months, the subtle ways Jamal's family had eroded her confidence, the endless criticisms, the gaslighting, the laughter behind closed doors. They had done everything to break her. Every insult had been carefully measured, every cruel word spoken to wound her spirit. And yet, here she was, still breathing, still fighting, still alive. She walked several blocks before finding an abandoned apartment building. The door creaked as she entered, a small relief from the cold night. Inside, the space was empty, dusty, and smelling of old wood and mildew. It was far from comfortable, but it was shelter. She set her babies down on a pile of old blankets she found in a corner, wrapping them again as tightly as possible. The soft sound of their breathing reassured her. She sat down beside them, hugging herself, letting the weight of exhaustion press on her shoulders. She closed her eyes and thought about her life before Jamal's family. She had been someone else than a woman of power, independence, and influence. A life she had put aside for love. She had believed that marriage would change things, that love would protect her. And now, that belief lay shattered on the cold floor of this abandoned room. But something inside her stirred. That part of her, the strong, intelligent, capable woman, was still alive. And she would not let it die here, in the dark, under the cruelty of those who had underestimated her. Pulling her old, worn bag closer, she felt the familiar shape of her phone. It had been unused for years, buried in her belongings, forgotten by everyone but her. It contained contacts, allies, and connections from a life that had been hers long before Jamal's family thought they could control her. This was her lifeline. A spark of hope ignited in her chest. She whispered to her babies again, "Mama's not done. We're going to survive this. We're going to rise above it all." Her voice was soft, but firm. The babies stirred, sensing her determination. Outside, Jamal's family laughed, oblivious to the storm brewing quietly. They thought this was the end of Tiana, the final victory of their cruelty. Little did they know, every act of cruelty had strengthened her resolve. Their laughter, their arrogance, had fueled her determination. They had built the path she now walked, the path to her own reckoning. As the night passed, Tiana made small plans. She could not move too fast, not yet. She needed patience, precision, and strategy. Every detail mattered. She reached out to one old ally with a simple, coded message. Help would be needed soon. Another call went to a mentor who had once guided her through the corporate world. Slowly, quietly, her network began to respond. Every reply, every small promise of support filled her with a sense of purpose. She was not alone. She had resources, brains, and strategy on her side. By sunrise, she had mapped out the first steps of her return. This was not a battle to be fought with anger or impulsiveness. This was a war to be won with patience and calculated moves. Jamal, meanwhile, stayed silent in his home, haunted by what he had done. He wanted to act, to help, to apologize, but the chains of his family's control were too strong. Every time he opened his mouth, his mother's piercing gaze reminded him of the consequences of disobedience. He felt guilt, fear, and shame, yet he could not summon the courage to stand against them. His weakness was a cage, and Tiana's absence began to haunt him. He began to hear whispers of her survival, rumors of her quiet return, hints of her growing strength. And with every passing day, a small seed of fear took root in his heart. For the first time, he realized he had underestimated the woman he had called his wife. By the end of the first week, Tiana had secured a small, safer apartment, stocked basic necessities, and found allies willing to help her rebuild. She moved carefully, never showing her growing confidence too openly. Every action was deliberate, calculated. She allowed small rumors of her presence to reach the neighborhood just enough for Jamal's family to notice, but not enough to expose her fully. Luxury cars seen near her building, discreet visitors arriving, tiny hints of a power they could not yet comprehend. They laughed at first, dismissing it as coincidence, but the unease in their eyes betrayed the first cracks in their arrogance. Tiana spent nights planning, mapping each step of her ultimate return. She whispered to her babies as she tucked them into makeshift beds, "We are going to rise. We are going to show them that cruelty never wins in the end." Her resolve hardened. The nights of betrayal, humiliation, and pain had not broken her. They had shaped her. And soon, the family that had thrown her into the cold would understand the depth of her strength. Days turned into weeks, and Tiana quietly settled into her small, abandoned apartment. The room was modest, barely enough space for her and her 3 babies, but it was safe. It was private, away from Jamal's cruel family and their constant whispers of judgment. She spent the mornings checking on the babies, making sure each one was warm, fed, and safe. Their small, fragile bodies leaned against her as she whispered words of comfort. "Mama's here. Mama won't let anyone hurt us again." Their cries had once filled the room with panic and desperation. Now, she listened to them with a steady, controlled heart. She could not afford panic, not anymore. Her mind was working even as she rocked them. By afternoon, she would take small walks outside, keeping the babies close, cautious of prying eyes. Each step was measured, deliberate. She began reconnecting with old contacts from before her marriage. One by one, people who had once respected her for her intelligence and business acumen reached out to her. Lawyers, business associates, mentors all offered help, subtly at first, testing her intentions. Tiana smiled politely at every visitor, appearing vulnerable yet cautious. Each meeting, every handshake, every whispered conversation was a calculated move toward rebuilding her empire. She allowed small hints of her return to leak into the streets. A sleek car parked near her building. A well-dressed assistant carrying documents. Brief glances at luxury properties in the neighborhood. Rumors started to spread. People talked quietly, unsure whether the whispers were true. Meanwhile, back in Jamal's house, unease began to creep into the family's arrogance. Jamal's mother noticed the small details, the hints of Tiana's growing influence. "It's nothing," she said aloud, trying to convince herself. "Just rumors." Yet her voice wavered. His sister became quiet, avoiding conversations with Jamal about Tiana. Even Jamal began to feel fear, a gnawing doubt he had never experienced before. He had always been weak, controlled by his family, unable to stand up for his wife or himself. And now, the cracks in his perception became impossible to ignore. Each day, he heard more, whispers of a woman seen in the city, conducting herself with a confidence he had never recognized. He tried to warn his mother to be careful, but the grip of her control silenced him. Tiana, on the other hand, moved with calm precision. She never rushed. She never revealed too much. Every step, every word, every hint of her strength was intentional. She allowed the world to see glimpses of power without revealing the full picture. She let Jamal's family think they were safe, that she was still weak. But in the quiet corners of her apartment, she planned. Every night, after the baby slept, she spread out old contracts, documents, and contacts across the table. Her strategy was meticulous. Each ally had a role. Each meeting had a purpose. Every dollar she invested, every property she reclaimed quietly, was a step toward reclaiming her life and seeking justice against a family that had thrown her out without mercy. The tension between patience and urgency became her rhythm. She could not confront the family. They were too powerful, too arrogant, too blind to the storm she was quietly building. But the day was coming when they would notice. Every rumor, every sign, every carefully leaked hint of her power was a thread tying the family's eventual downfall to her hands. Luxury cars parked discreetly, lawyers arriving quietly to consult, business partners making subtle inquiries. Each action planted fear, even if they didn't know why. Jamal began noticing changes in the neighborhood. Small but unmistakable. For the first time, he questioned everything. Had they really defeated her? Was she truly gone? Tiana spent weeks strengthening herself and her resources. She made lists, prioritized contacts, and tested her strategies. Every move was calculated to create the perfect return. Her intelligence, her patience, and her ability to remain unseen became her strongest weapons. She allowed herself small victories, a completed deal, an ally's loyalty confirmed, a property quietly reclaimed. With every success, her confidence grew, but she remained calm. The babies were always her priority. Each night she whispered, "We are rising. We are stronger than they ever imagined." Her love for them fueled her, as much as her desire for justice against the cruelty she had endured. By the second month, subtle shifts became noticeable. Jamal's mother began questioning herself. "Maybe the rumors are true," she whispered to her sister. The sister nodded silently, eyes wide, realizing they might have underestimated Tiana. Jamal grew more hesitant, caught in guilt and fear. He had been passive, weak, and blind. Now, he saw the woman he had once dismissed standing tall from afar, commanding attention, commanding respect. Tiana, meanwhile, remained calm, almost invisible in her movements, yet her presence loomed large. Tiana allowed herself to plan small psychological traps. She sent invitations for meetings that she never attended openly, but allowed witnesses to see her absence. She made strategic appearances that seemed accidental. A well-dressed woman entering an office, a whisper of her name in legal circles, a hint of ownership over a property, all these carefully crafted hints built the tension and anticipation. Jamal's family laughed at first, dismissing them as coincidence or exaggeration. But the unease was there, growing quietly, until the tension became unbearable. Each tiny victory was a lesson in patience and strategy. She also prepared her children. Though small and innocent, they had begun sensing her determination. Each morning, as she fed them, she whispered, "One day we will be free. One day they will understand what strength looks like." Her voice was soft yet firm, planting seeds of resilience in their minds, even as infants. Her heart, though burdened with pain, remained steadfast. She had endured rejection, humiliation, and betrayal, yet she was alive, capable, and relentless. The family that had thrown her out had no idea the life they had destroyed was rising quietly, waiting for the moment to strike. Every night, she reviewed her plans. She mapped the steps for her eventual return, ensuring that when she finally appeared before Jamal and his family, she would be untouchable. She did not seek vengeance through anger, but through strategy, patience, and the careful rebuilding of her life. The family's cruelty, she realized, had given her the strength and focus she needed to return stronger than ever. By the end of the third month, Tiana had quietly secured allies, reclaimed portions of her former wealth, and strengthened her position. The world outside remained unaware of her growing power, yet Jamal's family began feeling the tremors. Whispers of her return circulated. Tiny hints of her growing influence reached the ears of the neighborhood, and small sightings of her presence caused unease among the very people who had once mocked her. Her silent strategy had begun. Every step was deliberate, every movement intentional. The family that had thought themselves victorious was now unknowingly preparing their own downfall. And Tiana, with her babies in her arms and her mind sharp with planning, waited patiently for the perfect moment. She was no longer the woman they had thrown out at midnight. She was stronger, wiser, and ready to claim the justice she deserved. Months had passed since Tiana was thrown into the cold, abandoned streets with her 3 newborn babies in her arms. Every night, she had whispered promises to them. "We are stronger than anyone can imagine. We will survive. We will rise." And now, after months of careful planning, quiet strength building, and reclaiming her power piece by piece, that moment had arrived. Tiana's return would not be loud, but it would be impossible to ignore. She approached the family home quietly, her steps measured, her babies wrapped snugly in blankets. Jamal opened the door first, and for the first time, his weakness and passivity were exposed. He froze, staring at the woman he had underestimated for months. Gone was the tired, frightened woman he had left at the doorstep. In her place stood someone calm, confident, and commanding. Her eyes reflected a quiet fire, a strength forged through betrayal, heartbreak, and determination. His mother gasped, covering her mouth as if trying to hide the shock. His sister's face turned pale, and the arrogance that had once defined the family wavered like a fragile flame in the wind. Tiana didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream or beg for justice. She simply walked into the living room, holding her babies, her posture straight, commanding attention without a word. She had allowed months to pass, quietly building her empire, securing legal documents, reclaiming wealth, and aligning herself with powerful allies. Now, she was untouchable, and the family could no longer dismiss her presence. Documents were placed on the table. Ownership papers, bank statements, business contracts, property deeds all confirming what they had never suspected. The woman they had thrown away at midnight was a billionaire. Jamal trembled. For the first time in his life, he realized the depth of his weakness, the extent to which he had allowed himself to be controlled. His family had manipulated him, guided him, made decisions in his place, and he had obeyed without question. And now, facing Tiana, he felt guilt, shame, and fear collide in his chest. The man who once stood silently as cruelty was inflicted upon his wife could do nothing but watch. The mother tried to speak first, her voice trembling with disbelief and panic. "Tiana, we didn't know." Her words faltered, caught in the realization that her arrogance had blinded her. The sister attempted to plead, but no sentence could escape her trembling lips. Tiana did not respond with anger or malice. Her revenge was not in words. It was in action, in presence, in the undeniable reality she had built. Every insult, every act of cruelty, every night they had mocked her, had been transformed into strength, patience, and strategy. The family had unknowingly created their own downfall. She looked at Jamal, the man who had once promised to protect her, but had failed under the weight of obedience to his family. His silence, his inaction, had caused unimaginable pain. Yet she did not gloat over him. Her heart had learned the balance between justice and unnecessary cruelty. She reclaimed her children, ensuring their safety above all else. She would not allow the family's arrogance to harm them again. The tension in the room was palpable. The family, who had once wielded power over her life, now sat helpless, staring at the undeniable truth. Tiana's calm was deafening, louder than any scream or confrontation. Her strategy had worked flawlessly. Months of patient planning, calculated moves, and careful alliances had led to this moment. The world outside remained oblivious, but inside this home, a reckoning had arrived. Tiana walked through each room, quietly observing, every glance precise, every movement deliberate. Her babies slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of the drama unfolding, but their presence amplified the gravity of her return. Every piece of evidence she had prepared, every ally aligned, and every legal move executed over the months culminated in this silent confrontation. Jamal's mother realized too late that cruelty and arrogance could not withstand patience, intelligence, and strategy. The woman they had dismissed as powerless was now the orchestrator of their humiliation. Their pride, wealth, and influence were no longer shields. They were reminders of the arrogance that had underestimated Tiana. Jamal's sister, who had laughed at her initially, now shrank into the corner. Realizing that mockery and scorn could never defeat calculated patience. Every word, every action of the past months had built a fortress around Tiana, a fortress of strength, determination, and undeniable reality. Tiana addressed no one directly. She let the facts speak for themselves. Ownership documents, bank statements, legal proof of assets, every sheet laid on the table like a quiet hammer, striking down the lies and illusions the family had believed about her. Jamal could only watch, powerless, as the truth unfolded. His inaction had made him weak, and now the consequences were clear. His family's cruelty had been rewarded with nothing but their own regret. Weeks of planning, patience, and quiet perseverance had led to this day. Tiana had orchestrated every move, foreseen every reaction, anticipated every excuse, and now, at last, the moment of reckoning had arrived. She had taken the time to rebuild, to strengthen herself, to secure her children's safety, and to ensure that when she finally returned, she would be untouchable. The family's shock was complete, their powerlessness undeniable. Tiana did not speak. She allowed silence to fill the room. Each pause, each breath was a reminder of the months of preparation, the resilience, and the strength they had underestimated. Her calm presence was louder than any words of anger or revenge could ever be. The lesson was clear. Cruelty might seem victorious in the moment, but strategy, patience, and resilience ultimately prevail. Finally, she walked to the door, her babies in her arms, and paused. She glanced back once, letting them absorb the full impact of her quiet power. She did not shout. She did not demand apologies. She simply left, a living testament to the fact that strength, patience, and intelligence were far more powerful than cruelty and arrogance. Jamal and his family were left with nothing but regret, shame, and a bitter understanding of the consequences of their actions. Outside, the city was calm, oblivious to the drama within that house. Tiana took a deep breath, her children safe and asleep. She whispered softly, "We survived. We rose. We are stronger than they ever imagined." Her heart, though scarred by betrayal, was unbroken. Her patience, perseverance, and calculated intelligence had transformed the night of humiliation into a lifetime of victory. Her revenge had not been loud. It had not required violence. It had been quiet, deliberate, and devastating in its effect. The family that had believed themselves powerful now faced the truth. They had underestimated her entirely. And in that realization, their own arrogance became their undoing. Tiana walked into her new life with her children, stronger, wiser, and free. Her journey had been painful, heartbreaking, and filled with betrayal. But through every challenge, she had remained true to herself, using patience, strategy, and love to reclaim what was hers. She had turned cruelty into strength, weakness into intelligence, and despair into empowerment. True strength is quiet. Patience is powerful. Never mistake silence for weakness. Cruelty may feel victorious for a moment, but intelligence, strategy, and resilience always find a way to rise above. Tiana had proven that the darkest night could give birth to the brightest dawn, and that love, courage, and wisdom could overcome even the harshest betrayal.